They say hindsight is 2020. It's a cliche, I know. But when you've stared death in the face, we literally look down the barrel of a gun because of a mistake you made, that cliche becomes a haunt. It becomes the only thing you think about when you're laying awake at 3 a.m. Let me take you back to when I was 22. Fresh out of college, degree in hand, and absolutely desperate to start my life. I was living in Rochester, New York, surrounded by everyone I ever knew, but then I got the offer. An engineering firm in Pennsylvania wanted me. The salary? Let's just say for a kid drowning in student loans, it looked like a winning lottery ticket. It was a no-brainer. I took the job, but the transition wasn't smooth. I had to move fast. I didn't have the time to drive down to Philly, scout neighborhoods, or meet potential roommates for coffee to see if they were psychopaths. I did everything online, and that was my first mistake. I found a listing on Craigslist. Luxury apartment, roommate wanted, high-end complex. The photos were incredible. Granite countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows. The works. I called the number. The guy on the other end, Daryl, sounded normal. Chill, even. He said he was a young professional, just like me. So, I signed the lease digitally. I packed my Honda Civic to the brim, said goodbye to my crying mother, and drove 5 hours south, straight into a trap. When I first met Daryl, my initial impression was confusion. I expected a corporate grinder. Instead, Daryl was vague. He was a guy in his mid-20s, always dressed in high-end streetwear. Supreme, Gucci, Balenciaga. He drove a brand new sports car that cost more than my tuition. I asked him what he did. Accounting, he said. I work nights. Remote stuff, consulting. He never elaborated, and being the polite, non-confrontational roommate, I didn't press him, but the math didn't add up. Daryl didn't have a home office. He didn't have a laptop. In fact, he spent almost every waking hour on the sectional couch, playing NBA 2K on a massive flat-screen TV. We drifted into a routine. I'd leave for work at 7 a.m., he'd be asleep. I'd come home at 6 p.m., he'd be waking up, getting ready for his shift. But his shift didn't involve leaving the apartment. It involved visitors. This was the first real red flag, the one I willfully ignored. Almost every evening, random guys would buzz up to our apartment. They weren't friends coming over to hang out. It was strictly business. They would walk in, Daryl would greet them with a nod, and they'd disappear into his bedroom. The door would click shut. Muffled voices. 5 minutes later, the door would open. Handshakes. The visitor would leave. Sometimes it happened once a night, sometimes 5 times. I told myself, it's none of my business. I was just happy to have a nice place to sleep. I didn't want to think about the alternative. I didn't want to believe I was living with a drug dealer. The illusion of safety shattered. On a Saturday afternoon, there was a 7-Eleven about a block and a half from our complex. I was there buying an energy drink. As I was staring at the coffee selection, I felt eyes on me. You know that prickling sensation on the back of your neck? I turned around. A guy was standing by the magazine rack. He wasn't reading, he was watching me. He was older, rough-looking, wearing a heavy jacket despite the heat. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He walked right up to me. Hey, Yvette, you're the guy who lives with Daryl, right? My stomach dropped. I had never seen this man in my life. Yeah, I stammered. Do I know you? Nah, he waved a hand. I just seen you around the complex. Is Daryl home right now? The question felt loaded, heavy. I think so, I said. He works nights, so. Cool. The guy nodded slowly. I might stop by and say what's up. He didn't buy anything. He just turned and walked out. When I got home and told Daryl, he turned pale. All the color drained from his face. He claimed he had no idea who it was, but his hands were shaking. 3 days later, Tuesday evening, I was walking back from that same 7-Eleven. The sun was setting, casting these long, eerie shadows across the sidewalk. I saw a car parked across the street from our building, an old sedan, idling, the window rolled down. It was him, the guy from the store. Hey, buddy, he called out. I froze. Is Daryl home tonight? This time, my instinct screamed at me. Danger. I lied. Yeah, he's home, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He's got a bunch of people over. Big party, playing 2K. The man's smile vanished instantly. He just stared at me, a cold, predatory stare. He knew I was lying. He didn't say another word. He just rolled up the window. I ran the rest of the way to the lobby. I should have called the police right then. God, I was so stupid. I should have moved out that night. That night, Daryl was a wreck. He kept checking the peephole. Eventually, exhaustion took over. I went to bed around midnight. The apartment went silent. I woke up to the sound of thunder. No, not thunder. Banging. Someone was hammering on our front door. I looked at my phone, 3:17 a.m. My first thought was anger. Daryl, he must have gone out and forgot his keys again. I groaned, rolled out of bed, and shuffled into the living room in my boxers. All right, calm down, I yelled, reaching for the lock. I was annoyed, I was sleepy, I was completely unprepared. I undid the deadbolt. I pulled the handle down. The door didn't just open, it was kicked in. The force of it knocked me backward. Before I could process what was happening, 3 shapes flooded into the hallway. Ski masks, dark clothes, a cold, hard metal ring pressed against my forehead. Get on the ground now, don't you make a sound. A gloved hand shoved me down. My knees hit the hardwood floor. I was trembling so hard I thought I was going to have a seizure. I curled into a ball, pressing my face into the floorboards. Please, I whispered, I don't have anything. Please. Shut up, the gunman hissed. From my position on the floor, I saw something that I will never forget as long as I live. The guy guarding me pulled a plastic soda bottle out of his pocket. He screwed it onto the end of his pistol. It was a homemade silencer. That's when I knew they weren't here to scare us. They were here to execute us. The other 2 kicked open Daryl's bedroom door. I heard Daryl shout, "Wait, no!" Thwip, thwip, 2 muffled sounds, like a staple gun. Then the screaming started. They dragged Daryl out into the living room. He was bleeding from his shoulder. They threw him down on the rug, just a few feet away from me. The smell of copper, the smell of blood, filled the room instantly. The next 10 minutes were an eternity. They tortured him. They demanded the money, the stash. Daryl cried. He begged. But eventually, the pain was too much. He broke. It's in the vent, in the closet. Just take it. They ripped the vent cover off. They pulled out a duffel bag. Later, the police report would say it contained over $20,000 in cash. My roommate wasn't an accountant. He was a mid-level distributor for a collegiate drug ring, and his rivals had come to collect. Once they had the bag, the mood changed. Count to 100, the leader told me, tapping the gun against the back of my skull. If you move before then, I come back and finish you. I heard the door close. I counted to 500 before I dared to lift my head. Daryl survived, but I didn't stay. I packed my bags that same morning. I broke my lease, quit my job, and moved back to New York. I couldn't handle the silence. It's been a few years now. I live alone, but every time I hear a car idling outside my window for too long, every time I hear a heavy knock at the door, I'm right back there on the floor, freezing cold, waiting for the sound of a plastic bottle twisting onto the end of a gun. So, take it from me, if something feels too good to be true, it is. And if your roommate makes a fortune but never leaves the couch, don't ask questions. Just move out.